Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. We are not going to be doing politics and news today. We're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about this brand new book by Jonathan Karl called Retribution, which is all about the 2024 presidential campaigns that took place here in the great United States of America. I think we all need a break from news, from just the political machine. But by the way, we are going to be talking about the machine though in this book, and just whatever craziness the Democrats are up to these days, and take some time, reflect on the past, where we've come from, and do something a little bit different today. So pull up a chair, get yourself a snack, and we're just gonna have a good little chill hangout and talk about this book. So let's get right on into it. So if you didn't know, I have a second channel that is called Nathan Hale Vlogs. It is linked down below if you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble. And I talk about books on that channel. I talk about all the books I'm reading at the time. I talk about my reading journal. I talk about, a whole bunch of other stuff, just my life in general. So if you ever care to experience me outside of the political arena, you want to know that. So I had a little debate with myself of, do I talk about this book on my book YouTube channel or on this YouTube channel? I decided to do on this YouTube channel because I've really tried to make that other channel non-politics. I don't want to talk about the news. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about anything on that is at all necessarily controversial, or controversial in the sense of politics and news can be, right? So I decided I'll cover it on this channel instead, because this channel is all about politics. It's all about the news. It's all about talking about what is happening in the American political landscape at any given time that I post a video, and so I decided to put on this channel. So that being said, if you care about other books I'm reading, if you care about reading at all, or any of my life, go and subscribe to that channel. I'd love to have you along for the ride. So it's brand new. I just started doing it this year. I talked about it a little bit on Twitter, on the show a couple times. So yeah, having a good time with it. Anyways, so let's talk about this book. So this is called Retribution, Donald Trump and the Campaign That Changed America. This is by New York Times bestselling author, but it really feels like that anyone can be a New York Times bestselling author, Jonathan Karl. Jonathan Karl is a ABC News reporter. So however you feel about ABC News, take that with a grain of salt. I was really drawn to this book because of the cover. I'm actually a very pro picking books by their covers kind of guy, and I really like this cover. This is one of the best photographs I think I've ever seen of Donald Trump right after he was almost assassinated, after his first assassination attempt, by the way, in Butler, Pennsylvania. And so I saw this sitting on the bookshelf in my local small business bookstore, and I decided to go ahead and pick it up and see how it was. So this book basically tracks the 2024 campaign through the eyes of the staff, really. The staff around Kamala Harris, the staff around Donald Trump. It really talks about everything that was happening kind of a month-by-month basis, starting with the trial of Donald Trump in New York City with Judge Juan Merchant, as well, and then it ends with Trump basically picking his cabinet nominees and kind of the transition into the White House. So it's that time period. And I annotated this whole book. You can see where I really liked the book and where I did not. Honestly, halfway through started to fall off for me a little bit. I'll be honest with you. It fell off a little bit for me halfway through because it was newer information. I knew a lot more about it. And, I didn't really closely follow the trials that were happening in 2023 and 2024, frankly, because I wasn't super interested in them. I didn't really understand what was going on. There was a whole bunch of conflicting opinions out there of what was actually happening with Trump, what was not happening with him, and honestly, I didn't really get what was going on. I was a little bit younger then as well. This was in the era of me graduating high school, moving for college, all of that. So I kind of lost track of what was going on with it. So I really only started following the Trump campaign after he got shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is about right here in the book. It's kind of in the first section. I would say it's about 20 or 30% into the book. So I really only started following the campaign after that. And you can see that there's a huge cluster of tabs right here where that chapter happens. And then after that, there's just a couple here and there. So what I want to do is I kind of want to have this little book club. I'm just going to kind of flip through my tabs and talk through this book a little bit with you all. You know, right off the bat, if you're thinking about reading this book, I recommend you read it. I really enjoyed it. Some just overall overview of what was discussed in this. I think that Jonathan Karl did a great job. There was definitely some biased reporting that happened throughout, but you're going to experience that with anyone who's writing a book, frankly. But I think that overall he did a really good job. I feel like he talked about what was happening more through the lens of what the campaigns were up to versus what the actual people are up to. So I'll give you an example. I've always felt with any politician out there, for example, use Donald Trump, there is Donald Trump, the human being, Donald Trump, the personality, and Donald Trump, the politician. And they kind of make a holy trinity almost of those three people. And they're different people. Donald Trump, the politician, does not think and act in the same manner as Donald Trump the person or Donald Trump the human, for example, does. And that's really hard for people to understand, but it's how I really feel. It's how I feel having experienced Donald Trump for about half my life now. I mean, I'm 22. Trump came on the scene in 2015, 2016. So that was, about 10 years ago now, about 11 years ago now, frankly. So yeah, about half my life I've dealt with Donald Trump being on the political scene. So I've seen a lot of him. But Donald Trump, the politician, is different than Donald Trump, the person, in my opinion, and Donald Trump, the human being, as well. I'm not the biggest fan of Donald Trump, the human being. I'm a big fan of Donald Trump, the politician. I'm also a big fan of Donald Trump, the personality. He's a funny guy to watch on TV. So, he's a famous guy, just in general. I mean, it's how he got so much fame. He's on The Apprentice, right? I mean, he's done all these TV shows. Donald Trump, the personality, great time to be around. So Donald Trump the human, not a big fan of Donald Trump the human, I'll be honest. That's why I had hesitations with him and ever since 2015. I mean, I remember what the allegations were that were coming out about him. So yeah, let's get into this book. Let's talk about it a little bit more. I'm going to go through my tabs now. So the very first part of this book covers the trial of Donald Trump that he was on. This is the whole falsifying business records trial. And I learned a lot about this through this book that I hadn't previously known. So one of the major things that I learned is truly how dedicated these Secret Service agents are to the individuals that they are protecting. So we got a little bit of this from the New York trial, as well as the assassination attempt, where we have actual interviews in here with some of the Secret Service members who were on Trump's detail at the time. So what was happening in this part of the book was basically Judge Merchant had put a gag order on Trump for speaking negatively against things like the court, for example. And Trump kind of ignored that, and he continued to tweet after tweet after tweet about what was going on in this trial and everything. And it got to the point where Trump's attorneys had serious feelings about what was going to happen with Trump. Was he going to get thrown in jail for the gag order? There are also feelings that what happens if Trump loses this trial and he does end up getting prison time, right? There's never ever been a president who has sat in a prison before. How do you protect that individual, right? Secret Service protection doesn't just end because you end up in jail, right? They still have an obligation to be close to this guy. So one of the Secret Service agents was interviewed, Sean Curran, who that's this guy right here on the front cover. He is now the Secret Service director. So he was interviewed over this, and so I'll just kind of read you this whole quote. So Judge Merchant's threat was taken seriously. That's the threat of throwing Trump in jail over the gag order. It was taken seriously by Trump's legal team and the Secret Service, which held meetings to plan for how agents would handle Trump being sent to short-term confinement. Never before had the Secret Service had to consider how it would protect somebody in jail. Quote, "We had serious conversations about it, and I at one point told him he and I might be getting a lot closer." So this is Secret Service agent Sean Curran, the lead agent on Trump's detail. So he said, quote, "Look, if it came to it, I'd be sitting right next to him. That's how much I care for him. That's how much I felt that he deserved the level of protection that any of our protectees should get. There's nothing I would not have done for him." And I really think it's interesting because he's taking this from a position of, it's not that I care so much about Trump, it's that he cares about his job so much. He takes these things very seriously. And I would hope that you would take this very seriously if you're someone who's going to go and put your life potentially between a bullet and another individual, that you would really care about protecting them and you would really believe that they deserve this great amount of protection that could involve you losing your life all over this individual, which of course would eventually happen to Sean Curran. I mean, he was there on the day that Trump was shot at. I just thought it was really interesting. You know, I've never really heard interviews with Secret Service agents before. So this was interesting to read through and kind of hear a little bit from them about what was going on at the time. And also that was interesting. Like, of course they're having the plan for this, because what happens if they threw Trump in jail? What would happen then, right? What would we do? So anyways, later in the book, in the same chapter, there was an incident in which the elevators in Trump Hotel broke down. And it resulted in Donald Trump taking the stairs all the way down, and his media or his campaign aides were around him and suggested that he use this to his advantage and say that Joe Biden could not walk down these stairs because he had to walk down, I believe, something like 87 flights of stairs. Excuse me, he only had to walk down 56 flights of stairs. Still a lot for an old guy, right? So use this as an advantage to say that Joe Biden could not walk down 56 flights of stairs. But he said, in fact, that he was not going to talk about that because he did not want people to know that an elevator in Trump Tower had malfunctioned in any way. So he did say at a press conference after one of the days that he was on trial, he said, "We appreciate you suffering with us." So he's talking to the journalists who are here at this press conference with him at the court trial. So this is all the way back in 2023, if you'll remember. "We appreciate you suffering with us. You've been with us for 5 weeks," Trump told the journalists, quote, "We'll be resting pretty quickly. Meaning resting the case. I won't be resting. I don't rest. I'd like to rest sometimes, but I don't get to rest." So that was what Jonathan Karl at least feels was his subtle nod at talking about that whole elevator incident. So Trump's words were entirely truthful and literal. He really didn't get any rest that day. In fact, he'd hiked down more than 50 flights of stairs without stopping, and then he'd go on into the court. Yeah, so that was the other thing. He went down all these stairs without even stopping. He didn't take a break, right? This is an old guy. He's still making it down. So another thing that Trump said about this case I just thought was a fun thing to point out was he said that, let's see, where's my quote at? He said that the case was so rigged that Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. I just thought it was a funny Trumpism right there. You know, like I said, this is Trump, the personality coming through, and Trump's a funny guy, guys, right? He's a funny guy. So later into the next chapter, there was an interview with Hunter Biden. So Jonathan Karl had done several interviews with Hunter Biden. I believe he did an interview with Kamala Harris somewhere in here. He was very close to Donald Trump. There were multiple phone calls that he talked about certain things that Trump had called him about. So at one point, he's interviewing Hunter Biden. And this is at the point where Joe Biden had announced that he was running again. So he asked Hunter Biden, his son, about this. And in the book, he says, when I asked Hunter Biden about why his father chose to run again, he gave me essentially the same answer as everyone else in Biden's inner circle. Quote, "The truth of the matter is," he said, "it just went. The machinery just went." And I read that. I thought that was a really interesting line because I feel that we all collectively felt this about the Democrat primary in 2024 was that the machinery really did just go, right? The Democrats just kind of picked Joe Biden to throw him out there again and push his campaign going, what really should have been literally anyone else, right? I mean, I feel like we all felt that. I mean, from the sham primaries that happened, where Kamala Harris just basically got installed into the position of the Democrat nominee without ever receiving a vote, we all felt that way. That's why I take a lot of criticism to posts I see online where people are suggesting that we should just nominate people like J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio and just forget the whole Republican primaries for 2020. Just make them the nominee, right? To which I say, if they're really that popular of a nominee, why not let the people vote on them? We should really know, right? We should have an open primary and let the people decide who they want to represent them for their party. So I just thought that was an interesting quote that stuck out to me. And it is something that I feel about the Democrats. I really do feel like there is this underlying machine behind the Democratic Party that controls so much of what happens. I mean, we saw it with mainstream media, for example, during COVID, where we saw all those commercials that came out where all these different little news stations all over the country were all saying the exact same thing. So we saw it there. We've seen it where words have spread around all of a sudden. We like to make a joke and say that all the Democrats got the same memo. They might literally have gotten the same memo. We're not really sure. And I really do feel there's this kind of underlying machinery that runs the Democratic Party. I really don't sense that with the Republicans. I don't sense it because I see so much opposition that comes out of the Republican Party for certain things here and there, where certain people are held really in high regard amongst the Republicans, and all of a sudden, because of one decision, they're thrown out. We're seeing that right now with Thomas Massie, for example, where I actually really like Thomas Massie, but he's being tossed aside, basically being called anti-MAGA because there's some things that Trump are doing that he doesn't necessarily agree with. And I'm not going to agree with the people who say that he should just fall in line with the rest of the Republicans, but I'm also not going to agree with them when they say that he's not a conservative or he's anti-MAGA or anything like that. He certainly is. He has a long track record of it. So, not that I think that he's the most perfect person out there or anything. I mean, he's still a politician, for God's sake, but that's my little 2 cents on Thomas Massie. So, going farther along, talking about the disastrous debate that Joe Biden did with Donald Trump, where he's forgetting all of these things. This is the debate that ended Joe Biden's presidency. It mentions that, excuse me. This was even before that. So Joe Biden had held a private campaign event, and a small group of journalists were allowed to go into this event. And apparently, this event was just absolutely disastrous, right? There's no recordings of this private event. Apparently, at one point, Joe Biden had forgotten the number of Supreme Court justices nominated to the court by Donald Trump. In fact, not a single member of the press who was there that night, not one reported the president appeared exhausted, not particularly coherent at the event. So, that really stood out to me also, because I really also feel like that the media really pushed that Joe Biden was in perfect health, right? He was this great guy. He was a stand-up dude, right? Kamala Harris was going out here left, right, and center saying that she was around Joe all the time. He had so much energy, right? He had so much energy, guys. And he was going to make a great president for another 4 years after this. And we were all just lied to about Joe Biden's health. And it really wasn't until, frankly, now that we were even talking about it. And we're even not, right? There's so many Democrats out there who still haven't even accepted that this was even an issue at the time, right? And they like to point fingers at Trump when Trump has these minor health issues that come up because he's an old guy. They point fingers at Trump and say that he's unfit for the presidency when they sat idly by for years as Joe Biden's health deteriorated before our very eyes. And those of us who were woken up to this whole thing, who were watching the situation that was going on, we all knew what was happening. So I thought that was interesting too. Like I said, this book is filled with facts inside of it that I'm learning more about, and I'm just highlighting certain things here and there that I found interesting or that I would want to go back to someday. And I do think it's interesting because it also goes back to the overall democratic machine of, there were several different journalists there who worked for different companies. But not one of them thought to report on this. Why is that? Is it because they knew they were going to be ostracized from their role if they spoke negatively about the president? Right? I do think that's a very real threat that a lot of these liberal journalists felt. So, let's see. Kind of moving along after that disastrous debate I was talking about, that was covered very, very well in this book. I thought it was very interesting, a lot of things that led up to that, but I'll let you experience that if you decide to read this book. He goes back to Hunter Biden. So Jonathan Karl goes back to talking about Hunter Biden and about his father's decision to drop out of the campaign, or how the debate went more so, how that debate went between Biden and Trump. And Hunter Biden, he's blaming Joe Biden's campaign team for his disastrous performance, not his dad, which I do think is interesting. The blame, at least from his own son, was thrown at the campaign team over his dad, which, let's be frank here, folks, the campaign team was the one who was running the White House, right? Joe Biden was not in any mental capacity to be running a country. So it really is true that the campaign team is the one who screwed up. So let's see. Let's skip ahead a little bit more. Let's find another kind of interesting little anecdote to point out. So there was also a mention that there was this feeling within Congress, at least by a few Congress people, that Joe Biden was not fit to run again for president. But it really was not pushed out by any Democrats because they didn't want to get on his bad side. So I think also goes towards the whole Democratic machine overall. So getting into the Butler, Pennsylvania Trump assassination, I learned several really interesting things. Number one, that the shooter who was there, who shot Trump, police in the area knew about his presence for quite some time beforehand, and they even attempted to capture and arrest this guy, but he slipped away, right? Somehow, this message was never relayed back to Secret Service. So several different police officers in the area had spotted this individual with a rangefinder, and that information never made its way back to Secret Service, which I'm wondering how that was possible that never happened. Additionally, it talked about how this one Secret Service agent, or how this one local police officer, he saw the shooter up on the roof of that building that he shot from, and he actually climbed up onto the roof to go after him, saw the shooter, slipped and fell, and that caused the shooter to act more quickly to shoot at Trump, which could have been one of the reasons why he was missed, why the bullet missed him. Another thing that was interesting to me is that there were snipers on the ground that day in Butler, Pennsylvania, which apparently is not a normal occurrence by the Secret Service to have snipers there. But the reason why the snipers were there was a few days before, I guess Iran had made a very serious threat against the president's life. And so, I forget who this is who was quoted here necessarily, but there was an individual who mentioned that, a senior Trump advisor put it to me, quote, Iran saved Trump's life, which is really interesting, because the idea being that had the snipers not been there, Thomas Crooks could have taken several more shots at Trump and potentially hit him more severely than he actually did. But because Iran had made those threats against Trump's life, those snipers were there. So I thought that was interesting also. Another thing that I had misconstrued in my head was I thought that the Secret Service had taken Trump's shoes physically off of him when they tackled him after he was shot. But it turns out that the Secret Service tackled Donald Trump so hard that they literally knocked the shoes right off of him. And I thought that was so crazy to hear about that. And so this chapter really just walked through the entire timeline, literally almost minute by minute, of how things played out in Butler, Pennsylvania. So another thing that was interesting to me, and this I had never heard of before, this was the first time I'd heard about this in this book, was that, so basically, Trump is shot. They tackle Trump, try to pull him off stage. He's putting his fist up in the air. One of the Secret Service agents had mentioned that Trump was actively fighting them not to take him off the stage. And he's like, we were never trained on what to do if our protectee is fighting us to like not, for us to get him out of the area, because he's like, usually when people are shot at, they want to get out of that area, right? But Trump wanted to stay and put his fist up in the air and everything. So they take him in the SUV. They know he's okay, right? There's some blood going, but he's alive, right? And so they're driving away to the hospital, and all of a sudden, the president's SUV filled with smoke, and one of the Secret Service agents thought that he smelled gunpowder. They also heard popping going off in the background. So all of a sudden, these Secret Service agents are talking in this book that they thought there was potentially another attack or another attempt happening, that they heard popping noises like a gun. They're smelling gunpowder. Smoke is filling up this SUV. But it turns out at just that exact time, there was someone who was shooting fireworks. So a guy was setting off fireworks in his front yard the exact moment the motorcade taking the former president, who had just been shot, sped by his house. There was no actual second attack. But I had never heard that before, and I can't imagine what you'd be thinking as a Secret Service agent who just tried to put your body between Donald Trump and a bullet flying at him, and all of a sudden you're smelling gunpowder and smoke's happening. It just sounds like a crazy situation. So Donald Trump gets to the hospital. So once the motorcade pulled up to the hospital entrance, the Secret Service agents rushed Trump to the doors of the emergency room. As he entered the hospital, he greeted his aides who had been in the motorcade, but who had not seen or talked to Trump since the shots were fired. Dan Sclavino, Susie Wiles, and Stephen Chong. The doctors hadn't even examined him yet, but Trump quickly made clear that he had not changed a bit. Quote, he said, quote, how is this playing on TV? The former president asked. Quote, we're going to make some big news, aren't we? And I just thought, that is so Trump, right? Never skipping a beat. He's just been shot at, and he's already asking about how this thing is playing on TV. That is very much Trump, the personality, coming out right there. So this book, I feel like, really focused on Trump the personality versus Trump the politician or Trump the human, which was an interesting take for me, at least. So later on in the book, Trump, apparently the next day, this was right before the RNC convention happened. So the day after the Trump's assassination attempt, he had a golf outing with Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham. And so he calls up Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham had mentioned in this book that he did not want to bother the president. Like, he knew he was very busy. He was just shot. He's like, I knew, he's like, I wasn't planning on going golfing the next day after that. But he said that he got a call from the president. So he decided against reaching out to Trump immediately, assuming correctly that he had too much on his plate. But later that night, Graham received a phone call. Quote, Lindsey, I can't play golf tomorrow, Trump told him. Why not? The senator replied in jest. Quote, because I got shot, Trump responded. Once again, Trump the personality right there. Just, I laugh at stuff like that. I mean, there will never ever be someone like Donald Trump again. So let's see, what else can we talk about? Kind of bring up in this book. So this book also kind of dived into what was happening with Steve Bannon at the time, what he was up to, how he was in prison for quite a while. And then just kind of what happened with Donald Trump getting back in that campaign. So that pretty much covers my tabs that I had for this book. Where's some criticism I had? Well, I can tell you. I felt that the second half of the book was not super interesting. I felt that kind of towards the end of it became more honestly of a hit on Donald Trump and his decision making. It was very critical of Trump's secretary nominations, which I was critical of some of the nominees as well, but I was willing to give them a chance, right? I was critical of Kristi Noem, for example, becoming DHS secretary, but I was willing to give her a chance, and in my opinion, she screwed up. So I'm happy to see that she's gone. I was critical of some of the Fox News hosts that were hired. But I was willing to give them a chance, and they seem like they've actually done a fairly decent job. I feel like Pete Hegseth has actually done a fairly good job within the Department of War, the War Department as I'm calling it. So I'm willing to give them a chance, and I think it speaks to Trump's decision making that he found some people who were a little unorthodox for the positions. And maybe Pete Hegseth does not have the experience of being a general in the battlefield, but he knows what it's like to be a member of the military. And maybe he wouldn't be a good general per se, but he might be really good at managing generals, right? He has that knowledge behind it. I'm just giving a single example here. So, but the book really became very critical of who Trump picked for the nominees, who Trump didn't pick for the nominees, how all that plot process played out, and in my opinion, it felt like it was a little bit of a hit on him personally. It was still interesting to read, and I think anyone who's interested in the 2024 campaign should understand how that happened. But take it with a grain of salt, folks, and be open-minded. So I learned things about Donald Trump the human, Donald Trump the politician, Donald Trump the personality throughout this book. I also learned things about Kamala Harris that I didn't previously know. That I must say gave me a little respect for Kamala Harris, right? Not much, right? Not much. I'm not voting for Kamala Harris. I would never ever suggest saying you go and vote for Kamala Harris. I'm nowhere near that point. However, I do have a lot of respect that she kind of got thrown into running a whole political campaign and somehow pulled off the amount of votes that she did. I mean, she didn't get totally hammered. She lost all the swing states, of course, but I think it's an interesting case study to look at how someone was just installed into a political campaign and see what they did. She did raise quite a bit of money. Now, like I said, you can take that one way or another way. I take it more so to be that the Democrat machine showed up for Kamala Harris and they funneled all the money they had her way, and she spent $1 billion in a matter of months. So, that being said, I do have a little respect that she was the vice president of the United States. She gave a valiant effort to try and take over the presidency. She had some fairly smart people around her. Even we think that Kamala Harris isn't all that smart on this channel. Smart enough at least to get her prepared to go into a debate with Donald Trump, because in my opinion, the debate that Donald Trump had with Kamala Harris was a disaster, despite what a lot of Republicans would like to say. But she knew what she was getting herself into, and Donald Trump didn't. So I give her some props for that. Would I ever vote for her again? No. Do I think the Democrats should run her again? Absolutely. Run Kamala again. I'd love to see a next generation Republican frontrunner take on Kamala Harris. So I don't think she can turn out the numbers even in 2028, 4 years later. But overall review of Retribution by Jonathan Karl. Like I said, really enjoyed it. Learned things that I wasn't expecting to learn. Learned information that I had wrong in my head. It was nice to see. And if you're looking for a good book to read that I feel like does a really good job of summarizing the 2024 campaign, highly would suggest Retribution by Jonathan Karl. It's not an ad for him at all. I was not paid to say this. I bought this book my own money. It was how much did I pay for this book? $32. Paid $32 for this book. Not a cheap book by any means. You can probably find it on sale on Amazon if you'd like. I prefer supporting my local independent bookstores. That's just me. But if you're an Amazon kind of person, go for it. I think the one last thing that I'd like to say is that this book really did not cover campaign night or election night, which surprised me a lot. It pretty much skimmed over what happened on election night and how the Kamala Harris campaign was telling people that she wasn't talking, they ended up sending people home, that the election was called so early, that Trump won all the swing states, right? What was happening that night in the two campaigns really wasn't covered. And that, I wish it had been. I wish that we had some more material on what was happening inside Kamala HQ on election night. Because I'd be interested to see what was actually happening internally at the campaign, right? I know more about what was happening on the Donald Trump campaign, more so because a lot of it was filmed. I'd still have been interested in learn any new information on it. So that's about it. Little impromptu video here for this book. If you like videos like this, let me know. If you like to have news broken up a little bit, I like to have news broken up a little bit from time to time. Let me know. But with that, I will be getting out of here now. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming next Friday, so stick around for that. And until then, I will see you in the next one. If you end up reading Retribution by Jonathan Karl, or if you have read it already, please tweet at me and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some other people's thoughts on this book. But yeah, so I've been Nathan Hale. This has been a Friday afternoon edition of the Nathan Hale Show, a non-news show, if you'd like to put it that way. And we'll see you all in the very next one. Peace out. Bye.